Hello everyone. This story is about, what if God-like Naruto was able to feel other people's emotions and fall in love with Mei and Anko? Please like, share and subscribe for more. Also check the other fics I've uploaded. Now let's start. He ran as fast as he could, gasping for air as his lungs burned. He'd been running for so long now, but no matter how fast he was, no matter how far he made it, they were always right behind him, always there. He couldn't escape. No one could. Fear. He felt fear the likes of which he had never felt before, so scared, so terrified that they'd inevitably grow tired of this cruel game of cat and mouse and finally catch him. He was the mouse. The fact that he had lasted this long was something of a miracle, if he was an honest man. Considering that he was a shinobi, though, he would swear that he was just too skilled for them, that is, if he survived. And he wasn't a stupid ninja, either. He knew what was coming after him, what was hunting him. There wasn't a more terrifying predator out there, not that he knew of, at least. Death followed him, whether it would be quick and painless, or slow and excruciating, was still to be determined. The odds were slim, all but non-existent, but when one felt fear such as this, logic went out the window. So he ran. They had found him in a backwater dump that was almost too pitiful to call an actual village. He didn't even know the damn name a few days ago, and ever since, he had been on the run, trying fruitlessly to escape. They had already gotten his team. Their screams still echoed in his mind, terrorizing his nightmares. He had only been able to sleep once since they started following him, and only for an hour, but that hour had been nothing but terrible nightmares. Even as he ran, he could still hear the agonizing screams of his teammates, their shouts of pain and sorrow causing him to twitch every other second. His shinobi training told him that his current condition was a mixture of an unhealthy amount of adrenaline and sleep deprivation, probably coupled with his already certifiable paranoia. All those things were practically in the shinobi job description, and shouldn't affect him as much as it was. But again, logic and clear-headedness was long gone, and all he could think of at the moment was how scared his was. It was almost pitiful, really. He was a damn jonin, elite of his village, a veteran of 10 years in his own right. He shouldn't have been so terrified. But what was chasing him wasn't average shinobi. No. The things that were hunting him were not human. They were what went bump in the night. They were what people whispered about, the monsters in the shadows. They were what every enemy of Konoha had nightmares about. His musings were instantly stopped when a sharp sensation in his leg caused him to scream out in pain. It felt like multiple, razor-sharp teeth had chomped down on his calf. Looking down, he realized that it was exactly that. A dog, which looked more wolf than a dog, had his leg in its maw, its fangs sunk deep into exposed flesh. Blood gushed, and more screams were given to the world, as the beast twisted and jerked, shredding his leg into tender pieces of bloody meat. It was a gruesome sight, for anyone. The canine's low growls were a scary addition to its already frightening visage of terrifyingly sharp teeth. He fell to the earth below the trees, groaning in pain as he hit the ground with a loud thud. He was still. The large wolf dog landed next to him, growling at him menacingly. The beast was huge, larger than normal dogs or wolves, big enough to be mounted, really. The canine crept closer and closer to the man, not yet finished with tearing his flesh apart. Suddenly, a loud whistle rang out from a person's lips, no doubt, and the beast immediately stopped. The man still wasn't moving, but he could not hide his fear. It was almost palpable, and nothing could escape them. That's when they landed, one after the other, surrounding the man they had just hunted. 9 of them stood around him, and even though he didn't know it, they could see into his very soul or feel it. "There's no reason to pretend that you are unconscious, Jin." One of them spoke to him, using his name no less. "We know you are not." Jin slowly turned, having landed on his stomach, and almost lost his breath when he saw their eyes. All of their eyes were molten gold. Even the dog's. "Why are Wagakure shinobi occupying Kusagakure again?" Another spoke, his voice young but commanding. His tone was deep, the voice of a commander, of a legend. I don't." Jin tried to speak, but the fear overwhelmed him. So many golden eyes staring down at him. It was too much for him to handle. He was never prepared for this. There was no training that could have helped him in this situation. He was a dead man, and he knew it. "Enough." A third voice spoke. He looked at the one next to him. "Take the information by force," he ordered. And with that, Jin was met with gilded eyes that made his entire world turn red. Done. The man ordered to take the information responded. It had only been a single second. Always impressive, Karasu. The one to give the order replied. Let us leave this place. The one who asked Jin the question began. With a nod, all 9 of them, plus the dog, disappeared, the body of Jin going with them. After they were gone, it was like they had never been there. No trace of their chakra, no trace of their footprints, nothing. They were ghosts in the wind, and nothing could find them. More importantly, nothing could stop them. Nothing. Terumi Mei sighed. It had nearly been 4 years, 3 years and 6 months, to be exact, since the last time she had seen or even heard from the person she loved. Sitting at her desk in her office even after so many years, the Godame Mizukage still couldn't get used to paperwork. Mei's mind couldn't help but wonder. The blonde shinobi was always on her mind, and if she knew Anko at all as much as she thought she did, and she did, Naruto saw to that years ago, then they were both in the same boat. They missed him. They missed Uzumaki Naruto. Anko had stayed in the village ever since she was requested for an S-ranked mission. It took some deceptive convincing before the Hokage would allow one of her jonin to stay in another village for so long, but after Naruto's father vouched for the importance of Anko's task, Tsunade relented. Mitarashi Anko was tasked with strengthening the ties with Konoha and Kiri for the coming war. Mei could only chuckle at that. Kirigakure no, Mizu no Kuni as a whole was indebted to the bringer of hope. His actions in Konoha, personally protecting the Mizukage during a foreign invasion, reached the water country fairly quickly. And the act only made the people of Mizu remember how much they loved their savior. Uzumaki Naruto's name was sang and shouted to the heavens, not a child in the entire country forgot his name. He was revered in both Hai no Kuni and Mizu no Kuni as a hero, an icon. That, however, had led to the heart-wrenching decision she and Anko had made 3 years ago. It hurt their heart to keep something from him, to keep this away from him, but they told themselves that it was for his sake as much as hers. If the information left Kiri, it could have been used against Naruto, to hurt him. She would not be responsible for harming him, and Anko thoroughly agreed, if reluctant at first. Thus, they compromised. Anko would stay silent if she could stay in Kiri, and assist the woman she became to care for a great deal with anything she needed. Mei accepted, gratefully, and Anko moved in the day she decided. She wasn't going to leave Mei in her time of need. It wasn't easy either, to keep something like that a secret, even from her own village and country. Only a handful of trusted people knew. Ao, her most trusted and loyal shinobi, had been the first person, besides Naruto's father and Anko, Mei trusted to know. His assistance was crucial for them to pull it all off, after all. Then Anko got tired of running all of the errands, so Mei had to trust another, ending with her telling the only members of the newly formed 7 swordsmen of Kiri, Chojuro and Zabuza. And whatever Zabuza knew, Haku knew, so that made 6 people, including Anko and Minato, who knew her tremendous secret. Again, Mei sighed as she signed off on another piece of paper, unable to get Naruto out of her head. Even now, nearly 4 years later, she could still remember his warm skin against hers. She could still remember the way his heart beat, so strong and unwavering. She could still remember all the naughty things she and Anko did with him. Mei immediately shook her head of those thoughts. She was on the job, as boring as it may be, she couldn't afford to get, well, horny. A knock at the door made her sigh in relief. She needed something to take her mind off the person she loved. Come in, she spoke gently. The door opened and Ao walked in, a serious and grim look on his face. Mizukage-sama, he began. An ambassador from IWA has just entered the village, he explained. Mei's eyes narrowed. Iwagakure had declared open war on Konoha with their failed invasion. Whenever any country tried to contact them, they were completely silent. Their borders were closed off to outsiders, and all trade was immediately stopped. It had been like that for 4 years now. So why was an Iwagakure ambassador walking into her village? We spotted him 5 minutes ago. Asked him for his papers, he seemed smug, Mei-sama, like he has something we can't afford to decline. I have no idea what that something is, but I don't think we're going to like it. Where is he now? Mei asked. He's checked himself into a room. Ao replied. I have our hunter Nin watching as we speak. How many guards? She asked. 10. They look like Jonin professionals, that's for sure. Ao explained. Mei let a deep breath slip past her lips. Get me Chojuro, Zabuza, and Haku. The Mizukage ordered. I'll meet you all in the Blue Room. The Blue Room was a secret bunker that was built underneath the Mizukage's office during the founding of Kirigakure. S-ranked missions were given in the Blue Room, and shinobi had to have the highest level of clearance to even know about the existence of the place. Ao nodded before vanishing in a burst of speed, carrying out his leader's orders dutifully, like a real man was supposed to. When Ao was gone, Mei opened one of the drawers of her desk, taking out a single piece of paper. She read it, the letter Naruto had left her when he liberated Mizu from Yugura. It still made her warm inside. A small smile found its way on her face, before she put the letter back into her desk, locked it, and stood. Here we go, she whispered. With those words, Mei left her office, intent on finding Anko. Nezumi too, Ukami, Karasu too, and Sara dashed through fields of Kusagakure, their forms mere blurs to the untamed eye. Ukami, the squad leader, led the four-man cell, his wolf-masked form leading his pack in the direction of Konoha. Karasu too and Sara were on his flanks, keeping his pace fairly easily. Nezumi too was at the rear, there for his fast reaction time. If the ones following them tried to strike out, Ukami trusted Nezumi too to do what was needed to protect the squad. He was right. The earth beneath them began to rumble, and before most could react, earthy spikes shot up out of the ground, flying at their retreating forms with a speed that was meant to kill without mercy. Nezumi too was not most shinobi. Spinning, the blonde-haired Anbu turned, his hands flying through hand seals, faster than even Ukami could hope to. He threw his palms towards the spikes that would have killed his team if he wasn't fast enough, and gale force winds slammed into them, ripping the murderous earth asunder. And then, Nezumi too stopped. Karasu too turned to look at him, her long, crimson hair flying around in the wind. Nezumi too nodded, and without hesitation, his squad was gone, their speed increasing exponentially. He turned to the direction those who wished to harm his comrades were about to appear, and inhaled deeply. He was about to do an awful thing, for the sake of his home. For agents of Golem, the Iwagakure equivalent of the Anbu blinked into existence in front of Nezumi too, their pure white mask staring at his mouse-shaped one. They stopped. Nezumi was the codename given to the greatest shinobi of the Leaf, or that's what other villages had come to believe. The mask, the title, it was shrouded in glory and awe, both the first and second bearers being classified as SS-ranked shinobi, and a flea-on-sight order. No one knew who the new Nezumi too was, but they knew he was no pushover, and worthy of wearing the Godslayer's face. The one closest to the blonde Anbu agent, a brown-haired man with an impressive muscle mass, turned and looked at his black-haired comrade, an obvious woman and most likely the leader of the cell. A tense, stiff silence fell upon all of them, every shinobi ready to strike or defend at a moment's notice. No one moved. The wind was the only sound that could be heard. Nezumi too was outnumbered. There was 4 of them and 1 of him. It wasn't fair. For them. Without a sound, the 4 golem operatives retreated back in the direction of IWA. They couldn't risk engaging him, they knew they were outmatched. And for what was to come, their village needed every shinobi and kunoichi available. An army was needed for war, after all. Nezumi too exhaled deeply, glad that no blood had to be spilled today. A battle won without conflict was the only true victory he cared for. He stayed there for a few more minutes, he had to make sure the enemy had truly retreated back to their country. He wouldn't let anyone hurt his people. After he was sure reinforcements weren't coming, Nezumi too looked to the sky, wondering what his son was doing, hoping that he'd return to the village soon. They needed him. And then, Nezumi too vanished in a gilded flash. He reappeared next to Karasu too, the woman acknowledging his return with a nod. Even through her crow mask, the blonde could tell that the woman was smiling. Bukami turned to him, and Nezumi too informed him of the events that transpired not 2 minutes ago, through ANBU code. Nodding, Ukami turned and kept his speed the same. They'd arrive in Konoha in a few hours if they didn't stop, and they needed to get there as soon as possible. Their mission was a complete success, and the Hokage needed to know what they learned. With speed and grace only the ANBU possessed, the small contingent of Rohan made their way to their home. They had to report to the Godame. Mitarashi Anko walked next to the Mizukage with a concerned expression. They were headed back to Mei's office to speak with an ambassador from Iwagakure no Sato. She was nervous, anxious, more so than she should have been. There was a sound reason for this, though. She began. Safe. Mei replied, knowing what the woman was already going to ask. I have Zabuza and Chojuro with her Haku too. She explained. Anko nodded, slightly sighing. They'd be able to handle mostly anything together. Since they rejoined Kiri, Zabuza's and Haku's growth rate was incredible. Zabuza was now easily S-ranked material, and Haku had already made Jonin, his Kekii Genkai, invaluable to the village. Chojuro had studied under Zabuza, and although the kid had little to no confidence in himself, everyone knew he was competent. Good. This could be a trap. We have no idea what they know or why they're here. Anko said. She sighed deeply. I don't like this. She admitted. I don't like it either, Mei began. But I cannot simply dismiss him. It would be disrespectful. Technically, Tsuchi no Kuni has done nothing to Mizu. I was present during an invasion of another village. I would have been collateral damage, a casualty of war if I was harmed. They haven't done anything to us yet, so I have to keep appearances. While it was widely known that Uzumaki Naruto freed Mizu no Kuni from the madness of Yugura, in the shinobi world, that meant little to nothing. Alliances stronger than the one Naruto had with Kiri were broken for the most asinine reasons. IWA was probably hoping to play on Kirigakura's greed, expecting them to take the shinobi's path. Unfortunately for them, Naruto wasn't just a foreign shinobi to the Mizukage, but something far, far more important and dear. They're definitely here to strike a bargain with you. They want Kirigakura to assist with the war against Konoha. Anko explained. She went silent for a moment, her mind coming to a conclusion she thoroughly dreaded. It's going to be another world war, isn't it? Mei looked at the woman who shared her love for a certain Uzumaki through the corner of her eyes. I think so, yes. She admitted. Iwagakure has had an extreme hate for Konoha since the Yondaime crushed them in the last world war. What Naruto did to them was like adding more oil to the fire. I'm tired of it. Anko stated. This constant fighting, I hate it. Why can't everyone just understand each other and get along? She asked rhetorically. Not everyone is like our Naruto. Mei retorted, smiling. Anko chuckled, mirroring Mei's amused expression. That's for damn sure. Soldier Boy's one of a kind. Anko still had the message she received a few days after arriving in Kirigakure. It was from Naruto, explaining that he would be gone for a while, and that he wouldn't be able to see her for a few years. That had been less than happy news, but he made up for it at the end of the letter. Apparently, her knight in shining armor took it upon himself to rid her life of Orochimaru once and for all, something she was going to thoroughly thank him for the next time she saw him. With Naruto in her mind, Anko felt more confident. Even if there was to be another world war, Naruto and his father would be able to handle it. Anko, and Mei as well, probably was of the opinion that both Naruto and Minato looked at other S-ranked shinobi and laughed. They were the pinnacle of strength, and the scariest tag team in history, Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama, the only ones she could think of that even resembled them. And the latter only lasted a couple of years, if that. Do you think he'll hate me? Mei suddenly asked, her tone weak. For keeping it a secret from him, she elaborated. Anko looked at Mei with hardened eyes. Of course he's not going to hate you. He could never hate you, he loves you, idiot. She scolded. Her eyes were narrowed. Stop thinking like that, will you? You know him just as well as I do. You know he'll understand, even if he's upset for a little while. They had been over this so many times already, but no matter the amount, Mei still doubted her decision. She was afraid of what Naruto would think of her after he found out that she kept something so huge from him for so long. But Mei tried to begin, but Anko wasn't having any of it. No buts. Naruto loves us both more than anything, he'll understand. Anko didn't have to explain to her that Naruto's empathy ability would do everything for her. They didn't even need to speak for him to understand. Now toughen up, pussy, we've got an asshole to scare shitless. Mei chuckled in amusement. Anko sure did have a colorful speech when she wanted, that's for sure. And her tough love was almost as forward as her sexual advances. You're right. Mei replied. Now's not the time for self-doubt. I've got to be strong for my village. Her confidence back, Mei only had a smirk on her face as they reached the building her office resided in. Anko, on the other hand, wasn't fully able to take her own advice. While she knew Naruto still loved her, and probably always would, she wasn't sure what their future looked like now, not when Mei had something that physically tied them together. She was scared that she would be forgotten after he discovered their secret, and that made her heart hurt. Walking into the building, the two kunoichi saw 7 IWA Jonin standing in the waiting room, watching Mei with indifferent eyes. It wasn't until the men noticed Anko's Hatayate did their neutral expressions turn dark. They obviously disliked and distrusted Konoha shinobi, that much was clear with a single glance. The IWA-born shinobi's hostile demeanors caused the two hunter nin that were previously watching the foreigners from the shadows to make themselves known, their intimidating masks a warning. The IWA nin were not in Tsuchi no Kuni anymore. Mizu was their territory, their backyard. They were surrounded with more water than they ever had been, and any shinobi worth their jonin rank knew the real reason Mizu never fell to any other country during wars. Even when their own was wrecked with civil war. The shinobi of Mizu no Kuni were at their best near, on, or in water, and they could swallow up entire platoons with one fell swoop if they had to. Without any fuss, Anko and Mei entered the Mizuki's office, and were immediately met by Ao, Mei's trusted assistant in everything since the rebellion. Showing the proper respect the Mizuki deserved, Ao deeply bowed to his leader, ushering her to sit at her seat. As Mei sat, Anko slowly made her way to stand behind the auburn-haired woman, to her left. Her right was always reserved for Ao. He had earned that right with his service and loyalty to the auburn-haired Kage. As Mei took her seat, she took the time to examine the man she was about to play word games with. Tall, black hair and a strong chin, the apparent ambassador of Iwagakure no Sato was exactly what one would think a shinobi from the stone would look like. The man was dressed in a red kimono. Mei raised a single eye, he was possibly related to the daimyo of Tsuchi no Kuni. That was a clever tactic. While killing the messenger was rarely practiced, it still occurred even today. Sending someone of royal blood made that decision all but impossible, lest Mei start an all-out war between the royal courts. Behind the ambassador, 2 shinobi stood, 1 female, 1 male. The female was young, around Naruto's age, she guessed. Her faint smirk spoke of arrogance, but her eyes spoke of experience. This girl was no doubt a jonin, and extremely talented at that. She had shoulder length, black hair, and dark eyes. She wore the typical jonin wear of her village, and she had the whole androgynous thing going for her. Next to the female was a tall and brawny man, with dark eyes and short, dark gray hair. A beard and large, bulbous nose finished his appearance, his traditional IWA jonin were matching that of the teen next to him. With further inspection, Mei narrowed her eyes. She knew this man. He was Tsuchiki's son-in-law, Kitsuchi, a former golem. The man's appearance did not bode well with the Mizuki. All of her examining only took 5 seconds, her Kage-level intelligence at work. Clearing her throat, Mei began what would most likely end in heated words. Hopefully, no one would get hurt. Hello, Ambassador-san, I am Terumi Mei, Godame Mizuki of Kirigakure no Sato. She introduced herself formally. What has brought Iwagakure no Sato to my village? The shinobi behind the ambassador glared at Anko with barely contained rage. They hadn't expected to see a Konoha nin. My name is Kyoya, and as you already know, I am an ambassador for Iwagakure. Kyoya began. My business is with Kiri, though, and not for the ears of a Konoha kunoichi. He said with a calm tone. While there was no venom in the man's voice, there was plenty hate in his stare. If possible, I'd like for her to leave for the duration of our conversation. He smiled at Mei, his deceptive facial features trying to make her see him as nothing but a decent person. Mitarashi Anko stays, Kyoya-san. Now hurry up and get to why it is you're here. Mei commanded. While each of their countries signed the armistice drawn up by Konoha during the conclusion of the last war, the entire world knew where Tsuchi no Kuni stood. And Kiri was not willing to risk the precious alliance that Uzumaki Naruto had single-handedly created. War was such an easy thing to start, and simple treaties that were nothing but simple ink on paper meant little to nothing. Yes. Well then, I'll be blunt. Kyoya began, scrunching his face at Anko. The Tsuchikage has called upon the aid of Kirigakure and all villages flying her flag under the pretext of bipartisanship. Mei and Anko narrowed their eyes as the man continued. We're at open war with Hai no Kuni, and while we won't ask you to participate in anything on an official level, we will suspect a partisan partner to help fund what is inevitable to come. Anko's eyes were narrowed the entire time as the 2 jonin behind Kyoya watched her with near bloodthirsty eyes. She didn't like it at all. A benefactor. Mei finally spoke. You suspect me to agree to fund a war you started against an allied nation of Mizu no Kuni? She gave them a look that questioned their worth as living beings. Surely you can see how that makes no sense. We may have abolished the Yondame's capitalist regime, but we certainly have not begun the practice of altruism. There was no gain for Mei or Kiri. And it made her nervous how Kyoya still smiled at her. We are not asking for your assistance out of the goodness of your hearts, Mizukage Dono, we believe the terms are favorable indeed. Reaching into his kimono, he presented Mei with a scroll that was sealed by the Earth Daimyo himself. Breaking the seal, she glanced over it, before handing it to Ao to examine more thoroughly. And if we refuse? Mei asked. If Kirigakure wants nothing to do with this war, what then? Will your Tsukikage respect our decision even if it's not the one he's hoping for? Kyoya smiled. Standing, causing Ao and Anko to tense in preparation to defend Mei if the man tried any funny business. He easily handed the Godame Mizukage what the Sandame Tsukikage had ordered him to do if she was uncooperative. Mei took the second scroll the man had given her with a raised eyebrow. With ease, she broke the seal, this time belonging to the Tsukikage, and began to read. With each word she read from the scroll, her eyes widened, and she couldn't help the glare and copious amounts of killing intent she sent towards the IWA shinobi. How dare you? She whispered deadly, her tone so low that it actually sent a chill down Anko's back. While the snake user was a powerful jonin, Mei was a kage, and it showed as she stared at the vermin in front of him. It's simple, Mizukage Dono. Kyoya began in a nastily silky smooth voice. Do the right thing. The smile on his face said he felt he was untouchable, daring someone to start the shitstorm that would follow if he was at all harmed. A tense silence fell over the room. All shinobi present itch to kill the other, and for a moment, it seemed almost a possibility worth exercising. And then, the sounds from outside the office filled the stiff air, causing everyone to look towards the door. With a raised eyebrow, the IWA kunoichi turned and opened the door and left, leaving to examine what the entire ruckus was. With a near unnoticeable nod of her head, Ao left the room, following close behind the black-haired woman. Clearing her throat, Mei began, only a fraction of her previous anger apparent. I don't know what you thought you'd prove by coming into my village and demanding anything from me, but I do not, under any circumstance, take kindly to threats. She spoke in her calmest, silkiest voice. Her expression and tone were almost too sweet, and slightly unnerving. Mei was considered powerful, even by Kage standards. She had faced and fought Yugura, who was a Jinchuriki, to a stalemate during the civil war that wrecked Mizu. No one challenged or doubted her power and skill. Mizukage Dono, I don't think you're in any position to decline. Kyoya spoke with a voice that repulsed both Anko and Mei. You have no option but to comply, unless, of course, you care nothing for the balance of power the Shodai Hokage created amongst us? In which case, Kiri may not support our war efforts, but we will definitely gain an asset. With a repulsive glance, Kyoya had the gall to smirk at her. And once Konoha falls to our might, his eyes flickered to Anko before falling back onto Mei, Kiri just might gain an enemy. Mei clenched her teeth, grinding them in frustration. With narrowed eyes, she began. I'd tread carefully, Kyoya-san. You are speaking to a kage. The auburn-haired woman warned. Ah, yes, Kyoya started, a position given to you by Uzumaki Naruto. The bastard retorted. His methodical expression mixed with the excitement he was receiving for playing word games with the Mizukage morphed into something truly hideous. The fact that Naruto was the one to end the war might spark doubt within your people, Mizukage Dono. He quipped. And we should all know by now, his tone became deep and serious, it only takes a single spark to start a war. I highly advise you change your tone. A voice no one was familiar with spoke out, both surprising and confusing those who were still within the office. With slow trepidation, everyone turned to look at the window, which somehow was now open, and two figures stood next to one another. Why you're... Anko spoke with shock and, if she were honest, terror. If you don't, senpai will murder you. You've returned alone. Uchiha Itachi spoke, his voice calm. Where are the others? He asked. Gaara slowly entered the kitchen, his new subordinate sat in, bowing his head slightly to the man and woman Ishirsho called brother and sister. Someone seems to have taken Sasuke's lover. The red-haired shinobi explained. They've gone to get her back. He stated before sitting down at the table, which was full of various snacks and beverages. I see. Itachi whispered. Outwardly, the Uchiha prodigy expressed absolutely nothing, his face the epitome of perfected stoicism. On the inside, however, he was a bit surprised. Sasuke. His precious younger brother. Already had a lover? Itachi wasn't sure how he felt about that. A comfortable silence fell over the room. Hyuga-san and Hyate-san stood next to the stove, whispering about what they were going to do next weekend. Apparently, they both had the day off. Pushing that unimportant piece of information gathered via eavesdropping out of his mind, Itachi turned to Gaara to converse about something, but blinked in slight surprise. The previous Sunanin was fast asleep, his head lay peacefully on his folded arms. In the second that it took Itachi to blink again, he already understood. Naruto-senpai had told him about the sleep deprivation the Ichibi Jinchuriki suffered for the majority of his life. He'd probably take advantage of any situation he could to doze off if he was Gaara, too. Deciding to turn his attention elsewhere, Itachi stood and walked to the counter. He could better talk to the two people who were actually awake. Hyuga-san, Itachi began, I was wondering if you could answer a question for me? Itachi asked politely. While he never really knew Hayate all that well, he had served with Hyuga for a few years, and he knew just how close the woman was with Naruto. He hoped that meant she knew the answer to his question. I'm not sure, but I can give it a try for my returned Kohai. Hyuga slightly teased. Smiling at the younger ninja who was listed in the bingo books as an S-ranked criminal wanted for the highest degree of treason and murder anyone could commit. Ever. Itachi brushed her attempts to rile him up away like a fly. Sasuke's lover, Itachi started. Who is she? He asked. His voice was serious and made Hayate a bit uneasy. Yuga's playful smile vanished, and she stared at the Uchiha she knew as Karasu with curious eyes. Seconds passed by, and then minutes, before finally, Hyuga started. Haruno Sakura, she admitted. Her name is Haruno Sakura. She's a kunoichi who was in his class at the academy and in his team when they graduated. Instantly, Itachi's eyes softened, if only barely, but it was enough for Yuga's ANBU-trained eyes to catch. Ah, the Uchiha began, then it is okay. He spoke, more so to himself than anyone else. He would not allow a relationship with his brother, his only family left, that was based on preserving the Uchiha clan. He knew exactly who the Haruno were, and that they had a little girl who was in the same class as Sasuke. As an ANBU operative, Itachi had access to every citizen within Konoha's file, and had used that clearance to thoroughly research each and every one of Sasuke's classmates, as well as their immediate family. He may have been a tad overprotective. Maybe. But nonetheless, he knew who Sakura was, and he knew she couldn't have been a pawn of the council to help replenish the numbers of the Uchiha clan. He wanted his brother to find love, true love, and even though he was rather young, Itachi was glad that he had, apparently, found that love. A random thought popped into Itachi's head at that moment, and he found himself asking his question before he realized it. Does Naruto-senpai have anyone significant in his life? He asked. He remembered how close the blonde ANBU captain had gotten to the now Mizukage, and that had been when the kid was 7. He was almost hesitant to discover what he was up to now, 5 years later. Yeah. Well. Hyuga tried. About that. Uchiha Itachi stood at the window of the Mizukage's office, his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan staring at the IWA-born shinobi within the room. His eyes were crimson, with 3 black, spiraling curves around a pupil, with a small 4-pointed pinwheel sitting atop. Dressed in a long, white cloak with red flicking at the bottom, the visage of Uchiha Itachi stared at Kyoya with a contemptuous glare, completely ignoring Kitsuchi altogether. You Uchiha. Itachi. Anko replied breathlessly. What the hell was one of Konoha's worst criminals doing here? That's when Anko noticed the person who stood beside Itachi. He was older, and definitely looked more mature, but Anko was sure that the man standing next to Itachi was in fact Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke's eyes had a black background, with 3 crimson intersecting ellipses, with 3 black, straight lines in the center. It looked like a starburst pattern altogether, and his stare looked confident, of course, but also relaxed. It's been a while, Anko. Sasuke said without even facing her. His tone honestly surprised Anko greatly. He was no longer that little gaki who wanted to take on the world for his single self-appointed goal. What is the meaning of this? Kyoya spoke, a bit outraged. Kitsuchi was already standing in front of the ambassador with a protective stance, his brow sweating slightly. Itachi was just as feared in Tsuchi no Kuni as he was in Hai no Kuni, or anywhere, for that matter. He was rather confident in his abilities, but Kitsuchi wasn't willing to test his theory on the traitor. Stop talking. Sasuke ordered with a powerful voice. Or stop existing. he added, causing Kyoya to gulp slightly. Without preamble, the door to the Mizuki's office opened once again, and everyone saw the kunoichi who had previously been in the room enter slowly, and backwards. She had an expression of both fury and terror on her face, and it caused Kitsuchi to frown. His daughter had never made that face before. I hope we're not interrupting anything. A calm, powerful, and oh so familiar voice spoke. While it was incredibly deeper, and belonged to someone who was now much, much taller than he had any right to be, it was still familiar. It was him. It was Uzumaki Naruto. And Naruto. Mei whispered breathlessly. It's been a while, Mizuki-sama. They stood atop a hill overlooking Kirigakure no Sato, gazing at the certifiable army that marched on the island village. IWA was invading, and no one knew it. Gilded eyes stared at the assembled enemies with eyes that could not be determined. Before, when he was younger, he would have snarled, glaring at the army that would dare touch what belonged to his woman. He would have rushed in with reckless abandon because he simply could. He would have laid them all to waste with a flashy show of his power, ruthlessly crushing them without preamble. But he wasn't a child anymore. It had been nearly 4 years since he left his home, and he changed more than any could ever imagine. Now, his eyes looked at the amassed shinobi from Iwagakure no Sato with pity and a touch of sorrow. They were living, breathing beings that shared the planet they lived on, and now they rushed towards their death. In his gold eyes, he saw his fellow man walk to their graves, and that saddened him. Even if he would be the one to put them there. We are Hope's blade. Uzumaki Naruto spoke. Let us cut away the misery. With those words said, he and his Uchiha warriors vanished, heading towards the village. The others could handle Iwa's forces, for now. He had something he couldn't wait to do. The IWA garrison sent to Kiri was 500 strong, full of some of the most elite shinobi from Tsuchi no Kuni of the generation. And they all marched for the capital village of Mizu no Kuni with one intent in mind. The Godame Mizuki would submit, or she would be overthrown, and Kiri would be taken. Awaiting orders from their commander, the Tsuchikige's own son-in-law, Kitsuchi, the army of deadly ninja prepared for an all-out war with the foreign village. Kunai were sharpened to its absolute maximum, and shuriken were ready to pierce flesh. They were ready to slaughter everyone, the men, the women, even the children would see no mercy. They were ordered to erase everyone that did not wear an IWA Hitayate from the face of the planet. Orders were orders, and theirs was to commit absolute genocide. And maybe they would have, had they not been intercepted. We are Hope's blade. Uzumaki Naruto spoke. Let us cut away the misery. Vanishing in gilded light, Naruto, Sasuke and Itachi left the rest of Hope's blade to defend Kiri from the men and women who marched, unjustly, on a village that had nothing to do with their ire. With Naruto, the second in command, gone, the commander of Hope's blade spoke to his shinobi, his family. And even though he had only spent 3 years with some of them, they were just as much family to him as those he had known for much longer. We will politely ask them to cease their march and turn around. The man who could now challenge the Godslayer on equal ground spoke with a commanding voice. And if they refuse? A man whose gentle disposition was the pinnacle of deception asked, a few birds adorning his broad shoulders. Then we make them leave. The commander spoke, his words absolute law. Let us go. He said before vanishing in a shunshin that had no swirl of leaves or small gust of wind. And in the blink of an eye, the others were gone as well, absolutely no traces of them ever being there, or leaving, present. They were like ghosts in the wind, true master shinobi. The Mizuki's office had never been so silent or tense before. Ever. The presence of Uzumaki Naruto was enough to cause extreme panic. Kuratsuchi and her father immediately raised their guard, ready to fight their way out of the building, or die trying. The latter was the most likely scenario, but IWA did not yield. NNAR. Anko whispered breathlessly, surprised more about his appearance than his presence. The last time the purple-haired Jonin had seen the blonde, she had been taller than him. While he had been taller than most his age, Anko still could claim to be taller. But now Naruto was significantly taller than both her and Mei. And where his hair had been quite wild, now was a bit more tamed, and shorter, a lot shorter. His face was more developed, a gentle yet firm look about him. A white cloak with red flames flicking at the bottom, the same as Itachi's and Sasuke's, adorned his body, covering the black shinobi pants and long-sleeved shirt. In Mitarashi Anko's opinion, Naruto had changed a lot. And she very much liked it. With his eyes still ablaze with gold, the bringer of hope glanced at the IWA Nin in the room, making them tense even more in preparation. Naruto smirked. "Hello, IWA Shinobi-san." He greeted Kitsuchi. "I don't believe we have ever met." "I'm Dash." Before Naruto could finish, the kunoichi from IWA interrupted. "We know who you are. What are you doing here?" Her tone was rather rude and her father was now cursing under his breath. He had never before been so irritated with how his daughter had seemingly inherited her grandfather's impolite attitude. Naruto just continued to smile at them, his expression never changing. If he was upset with how the girl was speaking to him, he didn't show it. "Well, you see," the Kamikage began. "I came here for a private matter regarding the Mizukage." Here, Naruto pulled the giant sword on his back that no one seemed to notice until then out in the open. He graced Mei with a bright smile, which made the woman's heart flutter, not that anyone else would ever know, before looking back at the rude kunoichi. "I've only come to this beautiful island for peaceful conversation. So you can imagine my surprise when I come upon an entire IWA battalion marching for the very village that I once assisted to liberate." Mei's good mood instantly disappeared, her narrowed eyes falling on Kyoya. If glares could kill, the ambassador would have dropped dead 1,000 times over. The Mizukage could no longer suppress her anger, and the office shook and cracked due to the pressure of Mei's incredible chakra. She was a Kage, an S-ranked shinobi, and wielder of 2 bloodlines. She may not have been the one to end Yugura's life, but she had held her own against him, and that in itself made her a dangerous ninja. So for these people to so easily dismiss her and her people with this kind of disrespect, it brought out the killer in her. "You would dare." Mei spoke. With every word, her chakra increased, making these pests witness why she was made the Godai Mizukage. "You would dare come here under the false pretense of an alliance, only to strike at us when we are unprepared?" The tone of the auburn-haired woman's voice was so dark, so terrifying, that Kuratsuchi was now seriously regretting this mission. "Do not forget about the missive from Sachikage-sama," Kyoya said. He was definitely scared at how many powerful, enemy shinobi were now surrounding them, but he fell back on his training, and kept his relaxed, in-control facade. Naruto sighed. He really did not like the way this man was talking to Mei. "You should really learn how to properly address a Kage of a foreign village. You're being horribly disrespectful, you know." At this scolding, Anko and Mei looked at the man they loved with strange expressions. Blinking almost comically, Mei went to say something, but was stopped by Sasuke. "Proper respect is important if you yourself wish to be respected." The younger of the Uchiha brothers added on to Naruto's explanation, nodding his head sagely. Anko was now worried that these people were not Naruto and Sasuke. They were acting too out of character. And if one does not wish to be respected, then they cannot complain if they are disrespected. Naruto continued. "And I was so hoping that we could have a nice, respectful conversation." He shook his head in false disappointment. "Oh well," he started again after seeing the glares of the IWA Nin, "have it your way." That's when the Naruto everyone knew showed his fangs. Kitsuchi and his daughter had thought Mei's demonstration of raw chakra was impressive, so much so that the two who were talented, skilled jonin had actually begun to sweat. Her chakra was enormous and had a distinct heat about it. It was truly the chakra of a Kage, a shinobi befitting her position as the most powerful ninja in her village. That, however, was almost nothing compared to what came upon everyone in the office now. Chakra so warm it could take the sun's place and heat the planet brushed up against everyone, giving those present different feelings entirely. When Naruto's chakra came to life in the office, Anko felt like strong, yet gentle arms embraced her, declaring to the world that she belonged to them. It was like nothing she had ever felt before, the feeling of complete safety, of absolute possession, of protection. The chakra that could warm the world held her, caressed her, whispered to her that she was wanted and missed. Everything and everyone was gone. Anko was lost in the feeling of bright possession, and she had never felt so at peace and in harmony with the world before in her entire life. Sasuke just smirked when he felt the so very familiar touch of his Shirosho's chakra. He was quite possibly the most familiar with this feeling, though, as his brother, that was warranted. The strength and confidence Naruto's chakra always brought him was present, and words like invincible and unassailable were the only ones that could possibly describe it. Itachi just closed his eyes and inhaled, feeling Naruto's chakra, which had more life energy flowing through it than entire nations of people combined, practically rejuvenate him. Things like sleep and rest were all but obsolete when this chakra was flowing freely. It was absolute synergy. Mei was much in the same boat as Anko. The warm, powerful chakra engulfed her, washing over her with a tender gentleness she had not expected to feel from another human being. Naruto was the embodiment of carnage and destruction, but at this moment, with his chakra drowning the office, she had never felt anything so soft and beautiful in her entire life. Every inch of her was his at that moment, every pore was being drenched in life, and she could feel him holding her, devouring her in a way that made it hard to breathe, but in a good way. The others were not so lucky. Kyoya, the foolish man who thought he could treat one of the Godslayer's women even though he did not know of such relations, with such disrespect, almost lost control of his bladder. The weight and intensity of the chakra that fell on his head was literally almost able to kill him. He couldn't move, he couldn't blink, and he couldn't breathe. Sheer terror was a term he had never experienced, until now. He was so terrified that he couldn't even shake. He felt as if he even twitched, he'd be slain. The nephew of the Earth Daimyo could absolutely not believe that Naruto was human. The chakra that was literally drowning him was otherworldly. It couldn't have come from anything but a god or a devil. The latter sounded the most appropriate. Uzumaki Naruto was a devil dressed as a man, Kyoya was sure of that now. Kuratsuchi was a jonin, and even though she was one of the younger of the prestigious rank, she definitely earned her position. Being the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage had nothing to do with her promotion. She had a powerful bloodline and skills that outshined most seasoned shinobi. She had been confident in her own power, and she had never been scared to face anyone. She wasn't afraid of anyone, and she had made sure to have as strong a bite as her bark. But now, with this. Was this even chakra? Whatever it was, with it pushing down on her like she was nothing but an insect, she actually felt fear. She was terrified of this man, of Uzumaki Naruto. Was that why her knees were shaking? And finally, Kitsuchi, a seasoned, powerful jonin of Iwagakure no Sato, could now understand why his father-in-law was so obsessed with ending the absolute threat that was Uzumaki Naruto. Godlike was a term the aged jonin had only associated with people like Sarutobi Hiruzen or the Shodai Hokage. But right now, in the room that felt like it would explode with the incredibly powerful chakra that flooded it, another shinobi earned the right to be feared. Absolute authority. The boy had absolute authority of them all. All control was his. It almost felt like the right to breathe was his alone, and Kitsuchi did not have permission to breathe. Was that why he was holding his breath? The voice of a man who could destroy all living life on the planet spoke, his tone deep and his words sharp enough to cut through armor. I will only say this once. Naruto stated. Iwagakure and all of Tsuchi no Kuni will cease its idiotic attempts of waging war on Konohagakure and her allies. There's a much bigger threat out there, and you people want to act like children? The blonde shook his head. I haven't the time or motivation to save you from your own asinine ideals. If you continue to provoke us, we will end you. There will be no mercy, not for the men, women, or children. I will personally obliterate your entire country if that is what it takes to stop you. If they could, the IWA-born present would gulp or whimper, but as it was, they were paralyzed. Absolutely unable to do anything but stare at the godboy who held them prisoner with nothing but his presence. Congratulations, Naruto met the eyes of Kitsuchi, gilded, slit orbs meeting charcoal, black. You've got my attention. He then looked at Kuratsuchi. Now flee from my sight before I really get upset. Just as fast as it appeared, the feeling of Naruto's chakra disappeared, allowing the three from IWA to finally breathe again. Kitsuchi sighed deeply, his shoulders falling, but otherwise, he was able to compose himself. His daughter, however, almost fell to her knees, unable to withstand the sudden lack of extreme pressure pushing down on her from above. She managed to stay standing, but everyone saw her stumble. The tears falling from her eyes were also very noticeable. Kyoya, a civilian by most standards, did fall to the ground. The moment his knees hit the office floor, the man vomited, and if the smell was anything to go by, wet himself. After thoroughly embarrassing himself, Kyoya lost consciousness, falling face first into his own stomach fluids. For a moment, no one moved, unsure if they were actually free to leave. The fact that they were allowed freedom when the young shinobi could so easily have ended them and be done with a possible threat was strange to them. Kuratsuchi didn't trust it one bit, so she was a little scared when her father began to slowly move. Kitsuchi picked Kyoya up and tossed him over his shoulder, ignoring the smells the man gave off like the seasoned jonin he was. If left in the position he was, Kyoya would have drowned in his own vomit, and that would make him and his daughter look incompetent. Moving around the blonde with extreme caution, Kitsuchi reached the door, still very, very wary of the situation he got himself in. With a sharp gesture, he motioned for his daughter to follow, wanting to leave the country as fast as possible. The siege would never happen, and thus the mission would be a failure, but he wasn't willing to risk the lives of everyone on the slight chance that they could overwhelm the Godslayer. That such a kid couldn't do it with 1,000 shinobi, there was no way Kitsuchi was going to try with only a few hundred. With deliberately slow movements, Kuratsuchi made her way to where her father was, and the two of them exited the room with a pace that expressed their fear. Strangely, the 7 jonin they had traveled with were still waiting for them where they stayed behind. That wasn't what was strange, though. What was strange was the fact that they acted as if they hadn't felt what just happened in the Mizuki's office. Kitsuchi Taicho. One of them greeted. Are we proceeding with the rest of the mission? Kitsuchi looked around nervously, expressing anxiety and fear. No. Kitsuchi answered. We're aborting the mission. It was a complete failure. He looked at the hall that led to the Mizuki's office. We need to retreat now. We need to warn the others. He spoke very fast, and his breathing was heavy. Retreat? Another jonin asked, this time a woman. Retreat for what? Why you didn't feel that? Kuratsuchi asked with wide eyes, even more terrified than her father. How could you not have felt it? Her eyes were large and she, too, panted. The Godslayer is here. That sentence alone was enough to get everyone moving. Everyone had read that man's bingo book entry. Name, Uzumaki Naruto, previously entered as Nozumi. Flee on sight. Flee on sound. Flee on mention. Affiliation, Konoha no Sato, Mount Myaboku. Clan, Uzumaki. Family, Namikaze Minato, Uzumaki Kushina, Jiraiya. Age, 15. Height, 178.2 centimeters. Hair color, blonde. Rank, SSS class. Classification, Sage, Censor, Jinchuriki, Medic Mean. Notes, Uzumaki Naruto is the first shinobi to ever reach SSS class, a position that's rightfully his. So far above all others, a rank had to be made to explain the power this deadly shinobi wields. 3 Bijou obey his commands, and he is rumored to have studied senjutsu more thoroughly under the honorable toads of Mount Myaboku. Has faced the death god and still lives. Recommendations for approach, do not. Bounty, anything you wish Iwagakure/dead or alive. Follow them. Naruto ordered the Uchiha brothers. They won't risk taking us on, but I want you to make sure they all leave. Tell the others what happened. Sasuke and Itachi nodded, turning to leave, the two still outside the window, before Naruto stopped them. They all live, understand? The blonde looked Sasuke and Itachi in the eyes, something that would be completely foolish for anyone else to do. Again, the two Uchiha nodded, accepting Naruto's orders without question. And then they were gone, leaving Anko and Mei alone with Uzumaki Naruto for the first time in nearly 4 years. Mei was frozen behind her desk, torn between making sure the IWA shinobi left her country and tackling her lover to the ground and never letting go again. Anko, on the other hand, had no such conflicting emotions. Naruto, the purple-haired woman shouted in joy as she leapt at the man she loved. Said man smiled at her and caught the excited jonin in his arms, embracing her, sighing in content. He took in her scent and sighed again. He missed this smell, the smell of Madarashi Anko. She smelled of dango. Seeing Anko relish in Naruto's arms, which were now considerably larger, was enough to sway Mei into a decision. Naruto, she whispered breathlessly as she too rushed to be held by the man who brought her happiness, just by the thought of him. Being separated for so many years truly drove home just how much they all meant to each other, and those feelings were now all flowing out at once. Anko. Mei. Naruto whispered as he held the only 2 women he ever loved so intimately in his entire life, almost losing himself in the embrace. They were only pressed against him, but that was almost enough to make him forget about the rest of the world. I've missed the 2 of you so much, he couldn't even explain how much he truly wanted to be with them the past 3 years. He thought of them every day, wishing he could be with them without having to worry about his duty. There was a long, comfortable silence as Anko and Mei just felt Naruto, finding more happiness in just being held by the man they loved than they thought they would. He was so warm, and he felt safe, like nothing mattered as long as they were in his arms. No. There was something else that mattered. Something more important than any of them. Even Naruto. Mei shuffled a little in Naruto's arms, an uncomfortable gesture that both Anko and Naruto himself read instantly. Mei broke away from them, causing Naruto to look at the auburn-haired woman in confusion. Naruto. Mei went to speak, but was soundly interrupted by the sound of an explosion. Gone was the unconfident and unsure expression on her face, and in its place, Mei now looked serious and ready to defend her people. What was that? She asked of Naruto, already about to rush out the window of her office and race to where the sound originated from. Naruto grabbed Mei's wrist before she could leap out of the office, still concerned about why she had looked so terrified of him. It's nothing. A couple of the IWA shinobi broke off before the main group arrived here. They weren't aware of the call for retreat and attacked a building on the edge of the village. He wasn't very worried at all, since he could clearly feel the familiar chakra of Zabuza and Haku. They'd have it all under control in no time, after all. There were two others as well, a rather powerful chakra source he wasn't familiar with and Mei's and Anko's eyes widened, fear and terror washing over them in thick waves. No. Mei shouted as she pulled her arm out of Naruto's grip and jumped out of the window. He saw her sprinting to where the battle Zabuza and Haku were engaged in, with speeds that equaled her fright. Anko, as well, looked terrified and went to rush out of the room just the same as Mei, intent on following her. Before she could leave, however, Naruto stopped her. Anko, what is going on? He asked, slightly confusing her. Shouldn't he have discovered it all by now? Why you don't know yet? She asked with grief on her face. Know what? Naruto asked, slightly worried now at how sorrowful Anko looked. What happened to your empathy? She asked, still looking ashamed. I finally mastered it while I was away. Naruto explained. I've learned to turn it off. Why? Just as he was about to activate his empathy ninshu, Anko shook her head, grabbing him by the arm and giving him a look that all but screamed, I'm sorry. We need to get to Zabuza now. There's no time to explain, you'll have to see for yourself. And with that, the snake user dashed out of the office, trying her best to reach Zabuza, to reach her. Zabuza was an extremely powerful jonin, even more so since he rejoined Kirigakure, but even he couldn't defend her from too many enemies, even with Haku and Chojuro with him. And if anything happened to her before Naruto even got to meet her. Anko loved Naruto with all her heart. She was his completely. Her heart, her soul, her body. It all belonged to Uzumaki Naruto. Not once had she ever been truly scared of him. Not once. But the thought of what he would do if anything happened to that girl. Anko had never been so thoroughly terrified in her entire life. Ever. Deciding to follow and see what was going on, Naruto left the office, hot on Anko's tail. Momochi Zabuza, the demon of the mist, and a member of the 7 ninja swordsmen of Kirigakure no Sato, was nervous. With Haku at his side, he always felt like he could do anything, complete any mission, but right now. With 5 fully fledged IWA jonin staring at them with eyes that expressed more killing intent than their actual killing intent, he wasn't so sure anymore. Even Chojuro, the kid who was now also a member of the 7 ninja swordsmen was there with them, yet Zabuza was still nervous, scared even. The reason? Simple. It was not because Zabuza feared for his life, or even the life of Haku and Chojuro. No, they were all skilled shinobi who could handle themselves. Even outnumbered as they were, Zabuza was fairly certain that 2 swordsmen of the mist were capable of taking care of him. What Zabuza was actually terrified of was the little girl that clung to his leg, hiding behind him, terrified of the men who had somehow discovered her. The bloody demon wasn't exactly afraid of the girl, but he was scared for her. If anything happened to her. Zabuza had to shake the thought from his mind. The man had forced the fucking Yonde Mizukage to change his graduation ceremony for the academy because of the shit he had done as a kid. And even he was terrified of what the girl's father could do. Hell, her mother was also not to be trifled with. Those who proclaimed her as a false leader were idiots. That woman was powerful enough to gain the loyalty of Momochi Zabuza. That was an incredible feat in and of itself. Respect. Terumi Mei had earned Zabuza's respect, and because of that, the demon of the mist would die for her, all she needed to do was ask. But this. Zabuza looked down to meet gazes with the little girl again, her fearful expression causing his heart to ache. He had grown close to the little girl. He felt something of a guardian for her, a protector. It was similar to how he felt about Haku, but more protective, gentler. Zabuza turned to face the Iwa Nin again, his deep eyes glaring, the full force of his killing intent flaring. A warning. The enemy didn't even respond. "You're no ordinary Jonin, are you?" the demon asked. When they didn't respond, he smirked underneath his bandages. "Let me guess," his eyes glided over them, examining the way they stood. "Golem?" Again, none of the Iwa Nin responded, but that was all the answer Zabuza needed. "Hey, kid." He spoke to Chojuro, though he never took his eyes off his prey. "Yeah?" Chojuro asked, still staring at the enemy as well, his hand gripping Hiramakiri tightly. "We probably aren't going to survive this one," Zabuza admitted. Chojuro was silent for a moment, just staring at the men who had invaded his home. His precious Mizukage personally asked for him to guard the little one from any harm. He'd gladly die to serve his village, his country, his Kage. That was the kind of leader Mei was, the kind people would die for with smiles on their faces. She was the one who fought for freedom and equality for the bloodline clans, and with the help of the Bringer of Hope, liberated the entire country from the tyrant Kage. So his answer was actually quite simple. Then, he smiled. "I'm okay with that." Zabuza returned the smile, taking his bandages around his face off, showing off his deathly sharp teeth. "Haku, take the girl and leave this place," he ordered of the man he called son. "I'm about to show these people why we were once called the Bloody Mist." There was a look in Zabuza's eyes, a look of both excitement and peace. Haku didn't move for a moment, just staring at his best friend and father figure, before bowing to his master and taking the girl who didn't want to let go of her friend. Ready to vanish away. Ready to leave his family for the sake of another's. Zabuza pointed Kubikuribocho at the men he knew to be members of Golem, smirking. "Let's have some fun then, shall we?" And then he brought the full force of his chakra down upon them, leaking considerable amounts of energy. It was enough to finally make the enemy react. 4 of them went into defensive stances, while one rushed at Zabuza with the intent to end the man's life. "Don't underestimate me," Chojuro screamed. The bandages around Hiramakiri fell, revealing the blade to everyone. "Hiramakiri Kaiho." Chojuro was on the golem operative in an instant, chakra forming around his blade, creating what looked like a giant hammer. A hammer that hit the red-clad shinobi from Iwa with the force of an enraged bull, sending him flying back to his comrades. The injured golem operative was caught by his comrades, blood leaking from the side of his mouth. He tasted the iron on his tongue and smiled. Chojuro narrowed his eyes, before widening them, realizing what had happened. Before the young swordsman could react, Zabuza was already at his side, ripping the explosive tag off of Hiramakiri that the Iwa shinobi planted, and tossed it at the enemy. Before the explosion went off, the 5 enemy nin scattered in different directions. Zabuza looked back, making sure that Haku was gone. When he saw no signs of them, he smiled. "I leave it all to you now, son," the demon of the mist whispered. When he turned to face the enemy, his face was twisted in a snarl, his anger finally let off its leash. The demon craved their blood. With a fierce roar, Zabuza launched at the shinobi who were about to take pleasure in killing the girl he swore to defend his entire life. At his side was an equally enraged Chojuro, his blade screaming as they all but sailed through the air. Zabuza tightened his grip on Kubikuribocho, getting more and more excited at the idea of falling in a great battle with his fellow swordsmen. They'd send as many as they could to hell, where they'd kill them over and over again for their ignorance. It was going to be so fun. The instant his blade was about to do what it was built to do, the air suddenly became hot. Heat that was surely unnatural washed over what was going to be a battlefield and a graveyard, like the sun's light washing over the shadows. Everyone started sweating, it was so hot. Zabuza smirked when he saw Chojuro bend his knee, mirroring the kid. In a flicker of air, Mei, the Godame Mizukage of Kirigakure no Sato, was in between her swordsmen and the golem agents that were planning on murdering her child, her daughter. Mei had never hated anyone more than she hated Yugura, but one would find that hard to believe if they saw the way she looked at the invading Iwa nin. Pure, unadulterated rage filled Mei's eyes, her heart and her soul. She was so mad, so livid. So murderous. "Where is she?" she asked Chojuro, who, like Zabuza, still knelt behind her. Chojuro never raised his head. "Haku-san took her and fled, Mizukage-sama," he reported. He'd follow protocol, so they're most certainly deep within the blue room. The presence of a Kage made the golem agents pause, reassessing the odds of actually accomplishing anything or dying without purpose. Retreat, when faced by an S-ranked shinobi who was also a Kage, was usually the only thing one could do, if even that. They were deep within enemy territory, and there were absolutely no sounds of other battles. Which meant that the order to invade Kirigakure was changed. It was now that the golem operative spoke. "Shouldn't you be defending the village, Mizuki-sama?" A man with dark brown hair and weary eyes asked. His voice was deep and his face was rough, fitting a shinobi from IWA. Mei brought her gaze to the man who spoke, delivering all her hatred and rage to just him. The man, as an operative of Golem, didn't even flinch. Golem agents were born from stone, they didn't show fear. Ever. Until today. You see, a new voice spoke directly behind the golem cell, surprising them all greatly. That's the neat thing about a flea on-site order. There were 2 sensors in their little team. And neither of them had felt the presence of life or even chakra anywhere near them that they weren't already aware of. They all turned as quickly as possible, coming face to face with the one person that they were taught to be very afraid of. It doesn't just apply to individuals. One of them turned back to the Mizukage when they heard yet another newcomer appear. It was the Konoha Kunoichi, who they suspected to be the Leaf's representative. It applies to entire armies as well. The temperature dropped considerably when Uzumaki Naruto entered the battlefield. Everything just felt hopeless when the man who was described as a nation killer appeared. "Why you?" one of the IWA Nin whispered breathlessly. "Why are you here?" Naruto looked at the man who asked him a question with uncaring eyes, like he was looking at a lower life form. Like he was looking at nothingness. "The better question is, what are you doing here?" The blonde sat upon the giant sword Hashigaki Kisame made famous, Samahata. Why was a cell, who was obviously comprised of golem agents, so far away from the invading forces? Why this location? Naruto ignored the way Mei and Anko flinched. Silence greeted him, so he continued. "Kitsuchi-san has already called for retreat, Golem-san. If you answer my question, you can be on your way." His tone was almost sincere, a stark difference to the near-bloodthirsty ANBU operative Nizumi. Still the agents were silent, until finally, one cracked. "There's a rumor that the Mizukage gave birth to a child," a man with light hair and a smoother face admitted. He'd most likely be branded a coward if they made it back home, but he'd at least have saved their lives in his cowardice. "We were to either take the child with us, or forcefully cease the possible threat." Naruto was still for a minute, not looking at anyone or speaking at all. He was just still. A child," he finally spoke, his eyes meeting Mei's. The auburn-haired woman diverted her eyes, unable to look into his. It was at this moment that Naruto decided to activate his empathy ninshu, not wishing to be in the dark anymore. And that's when it hit him. A small, innocent soul that felt so similar to his own minus the innocent part glowed in his senses, standing out in its beauty. If he was the sun, all-encompassing and merciless, this soul felt like one of the small stars that twinkled in the night sky. It was blood. His blood. The huge revelation almost dropped the blonde to his knees, and it would have, if something else hadn't welled up within him. The fact that he apparently had a child was almost drowned out entirely now by the last thing the IWA Nin said. Forcefully. "Cease?" he questioned, his eyes hidden from the world. "Hi." Zabuza was the first to notice it. His hands. Naruto's hands. They were shaking. It wasn't long after that both Anko and Mei noticed it as well, followed shortly by Chojuro and the golem operatives. The Godslayer's hands were shaking. And then they went perfectly still, time seemingly stilling along with them. It was at this moment that Naruto gazed upon the team from IWA, his golden eyes slit vertically, and brought his hand up, his palm facing them. His almost serene, peaceful face that had slightly shocked Anko and Mei earlier was now so thoroughly twisted in rage that it actually scared the women who he loved. It was then that the Kamikage whispered the words that ended the lives of many before them. "Stop existing." Naruto made a grabbing motion, and when he pulled, all 5 of the invading shinobi dropped to the ground, their lives ended. They were reaped. The 4-man Rohan contingent stood before the Godame Hokage, their backs almost as stiff as the feeling in the air. Bukami, who was Rohan's lieutenant now, had just finished giving his report to Tsunade-sama, and now the woman was trying to digest the information, a wrinkle in her brow from her frown. "And you're certain?" Tsunade asked. She immediately sighed, though. Of course they were certain. This contingent of Team Roe was comprised of the most elite ANBU she had under her command. They wouldn't make mistakes like this. But that thought didn't make her feel any less worried. If IWA has actually brokered an alliance with Kumo, then the war we've been trying to prepare for might begin sooner than we had hoped. Tsunade continued, sighing again. I hate war. If I may, Tsunade-sama. Nozomi-too began. And once Tsunade nodded, he started. We now know that IWA is serious about starting the Fourth Shinobi World War. And we were all alive when the last one took place. There was a brief silence in the Hokage's office as everyone took a moment to give thanks to Nozomi-too for his actions in the Third Shinobi World War. After all, he had practically won the whole thing for Konoha, being able to fight on just about any battlefield he wished that was marked with his special formulas. I know that we've got an alliance with Kiri, but that may not be enough. Both IWA and Kumo are renowned for their military might. They've got bodies in bulk. The blonde ANBU operative explained. I think we should try looking into brokering an official alliance with Suna, or even a few of the smaller villages, like Taki. Tsunade rested her chin upon her folded fingers, thinking over her most powerful ANBU agent's words. It makes sense, but I don't know if Suna would go for it. We kind of took their bijou. She shook her head. And Taki might be worried that we merely want to take theirs from them as well. I suggest preemptive strikes on both IWA and Kumo. Ukami added. Strike at their food and water supplies. Soldiers can't fight on an empty stomach. His voice was deep and somber. It's almost impossible to do that, though. Nozomi-too started. We tried in the last war. Even I couldn't get that far into enemy territory undetected. And even if I could, getting out would be even harder. He shook his head. Subterfuge isn't really an option with these guys. Both villages have so many military precautions on everything, even spiking the civilian supplies would be too much of a risk. Tsunade sighed and nodded. You're right, Minato. The Hokage agreed. I hate saying it, but Konoha is going to have to rely on you and Naruto on this one. She tried to ignore the way Karasu-too clenched her fists. He should be back in the village soon. We'll just have to wait until then. Minato nodded. It was his duty to serve the village, and his sons as well. If that meant they had to slaughter thousands to keep their home safe. Nozomi-too inhaled sharply. Hi, Hokage-sama. He bowed deeply to his leader. Then so be it. This was all for now. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked it and that you will be back for more. Please like, share and subscribe. See ya.